I, 55M, never thought I'd be turning to the internet for advice on family matters, but here I am, feeling like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I need some outside perspective because right now, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, and my whole family is making me out to be the bad guy. Let me give you some background. I've been living in my current house for the past 10 years. It's nothing fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom place in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But here's the thing, I've finally paid it off. Every month for the past decade, I've been chipping away at that mortgage, and now, I can finally say it's mine. You know that feeling when you've worked your butt off for something, and you can finally sit back and think, yeah, I did that? That's where I'm at. I don't have any fancy decor or a big backyard, but it's a good spot. Comfortable, quiet, and most importantly, it's my space. It's where I can just chill without any stress after a long day at work. I've got my routine down pat, come home, maybe watch some TV or read a book, and just unwind. It's not exciting, but it's my life, and I'm content with it. To understand why this matters so much to me, you need to know a bit about my past. I've always been the irresponsible one in the family. While my sister was out chasing dreams and finding herself, I was the one working steady jobs, saving money, and planning for the future. It's not that I don't have dreams or ambitions, I do. But I've always believed in building a stable foundation first. In my 20s and 30s, I bounced around from one rental to another. I lived in cramped apartments, dealt with noisy neighbors, and had more than my fair share of nightmare landlords. There were times when I could barely make rent, and the idea of owning my own home seemed like an impossible dream. But I kept at it. I worked overtime, took on side gigs, and pinched pennies wherever I could. When I finally saved up enough for a down payment and bought this house, it felt like I'd won the lottery. It wasn't just about having a place to live, it was about having a place that was truly mine. A place where I could make the rules, where I could find peace and quiet after a long day, where I could just be myself without any pressure or expectations. So, yeah, this house means a lot to me. It's not just a building, it's a symbol of everything I've worked for, everything I've sacrificed to get to where I am today. And now, at 55, I'm finally at a point where I can enjoy the fruits of my labor. I've got a comfortable routine, a space that's all mine, and the peace of mind that comes with financial stability. Then there's my sister, 48F. She's married to this guy, 48M, and they've got 2 kids, a college student, 19F, and a high schooler, 16M. They've always been what you'd call the free spirit types. You know the kind, always talking about how everyone else is wasting their life in the rat race, while they're living their best life or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. We've always been close, despite our different approaches to life. Growing up, she was the creative one, always coming up with wild ideas and big dreams. I admired her spirit, even if I didn't always understand it. And to be fair, she's had some successes with her follow your passion approach to life. She's worked as a freelance graphic designer, started a small yoga studio, which didn't last, but hey, she tried, and even published a children's book once. Her husband is cut from the same cloth. He's a photographer who specializes in artistic shots that I honestly can't make heads or tails of, but apparently some people are willing to pay good money for them. Between the two of them, they've always managed to make ends meet, even if their income was a bit unpredictable. Their kids seem to have inherited their parents' free-spirited nature. The older one is in college, majoring in something called interdisciplinary arts, which sounds about as practical as underwater basket weaving to me, but what do I know? The younger one is still in high school but already talking about wanting to be a digital nomad, or some such thing. About 3 months ago, they dropped a bombshell. They had decided to sell their house, their actual home where their kids have lived their entire lives, and use the money to travel the world for a year. Yeah, you heard that right. They sold everything for a dream vacation. When they told me about their plan, I was speechless. I mean, everyone has these dreams of quitting their job and traveling the world, right? But it's like a phase you grow out of when you realize bills exist. Not my sister and her husband, though. They're the kind of people who actually went through with it. Their reasoning? They thought the housing market was booming, and they'd made a killing off the sale. They figured they'd use the money to live off, work odd jobs here and there, and stretch it out for a whole year, just going from place to place. When I asked about the kids' education, they waved it off, saying they'd figure it out along the way, and that real-world experiences are more valuable than traditional schooling. I tried to be supportive, I really did. I listened to their plans, nodded along when they talked about seizing the day and living life to the fullest. But inside, I was screaming. All I could think about was the stability they were throwing away, the risks they were taking with their kids' futures. But hey, it wasn't my life, right? So I wished them well and hoped for the best. I'm watching this all unfold from my little house, and I'm thinking, okay, cool for them, but also, this is a bad idea. They've got 2 kids to take care of. Traveling with kids isn't like backpacking through Europe on a whim. There's planning involved, stability needed. But they just waved it all off, saying they'd figure it out along the way. For the next couple of months, my social media feeds were flooded with their updates. Pictures of them posing in front of famous landmarks, videos of them trying exotic foods, long posts about how they were finding themselves, and reconnecting as a family. It all looked great on the surface, I'll give them that. There were photos of them lounging on beautiful beaches, exploring ancient ruins, and mingling with locals in colorful marketplaces. Every post was accompanied by some inspirational quote about living in the moment or breaking free from societal norms. They seemed to be having the time of their lives. My sister would post these long, rambling updates about how they were growing as individuals, and how the kids were learning more than they ever could in a classroom. Her husband would share artsy shots of sunsets and street scenes, talking about how he was rediscovering his passion for photography. The kids seemed to be enjoying themselves too, at least from what I could see. There were pictures of them trying new foods, making friends with kids from different countries, and experiencing things that, admittedly, most kids their age never get to see. Part of me was happy for them, they were having amazing experiences, no doubt about that. But another part of me couldn't help but worry. How sustainable was this lifestyle? What about the kids' education? Sure, traveling the world is educational in its own right, but what about the basics? Math, science, literature? And what about their friends back home, their routines, their sense of stability? I tried to push these worries aside. After all, it wasn't my life, not my decision. If this was what made them happy, who was I to judge? But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all going to come crashing down eventually. Fast forward to last week. I'm chilling in my house, probably watching TV or something, when I get a call from my sister. Now, I haven't heard much from her directly since they left, just those social media posts. So, I figure this call is going to be one of those, look how awesome our life is, ooh kind of things. But the second I pick up, I can tell something's off. My sister sounds stressed, really stressed. And she starts talking about how things didn't go as planned. Apparently, they blew through their money way faster than they expected. Like, within 2 months, they were pretty much broke. Turns out, traveling the world is expensive. Who knew, right? They stayed in nice places, ate out at restaurants, and just lived it up like they had endless cash. But when you're not working and still spending, that money doesn't last long, especially with 2 kids. Hostels and cheap Airbnbs are all fun and games until you've got 2 tired, hungry kids who need a stable place to crash every night. As she's talking, I'm sitting there thinking, I saw this coming. But I don't say that. Instead, I listen as she explains their situation. They're in some foreign country, I can't even remember which one at this point, they've maxed out their credit cards, and they're basically stuck. They can't afford to keep traveling, but they also can't afford to come home and set up a new life. So now they're stuck. They can't keep traveling because they've got no funds, but they also don't want to settle down and buy another house yet. And guess what they ask? If they can move in with me. Yep, my sister, her husband, and their 2 kids, all in my 3-bedroom house. And here's the kicker, they want to stay rent-free. They didn't even offer to contribute, just a straight up, hey, can we live with you for almost a year while we figure things out? I've got to admit, I didn't know how to respond at first. I mean, it's my sister, and yeah, I care about her, but this is my house, my space. I didn't work my butt off for 10 years just to let 4 extra people come in and take over the place. Plus, I've got a routine, you know? I like my peace and quiet. I can't even imagine what my house would be like with 2 kids running around, not to mention the mess. And it's not just about the space. It's about the principle of the thing. They made this decision, this reckless, irresponsible decision, and now they want me to deal with the consequences? How is that fair? So, I tell her, look, sis, I love you guys, but this just isn't going to work. The house is too small, and I don't want that kind of disruption. I even offered to help them find an affordable rental nearby or pitch in some cash for a couple of months to help them get back on their feet. But no, that wasn't enough. My sister gets pissed. Like, immediately. She starts calling me selfish, saying I don't care about family and that I'm jealous of their adventurous lifestyle. Jealous? Really? Now I'm starting to get mad too. It's not about jealousy or not caring about family. It's about boundaries. I don't owe them a place to live just because they made some dumb decisions and didn't think things through. I get that life doesn't always go as planned, but they sold their house without having a backup plan, and now they want to dump the consequences on me. And here's where it gets even better. After my sister blows up at me, she gets our parents involved. Now, my parents live in a tiny apartment, so they can't take in my sister's family. But instead of understanding my side, they start pushing me to let them move in. My mom starts going on about how family helps family and that I should be more understanding of my sister and her husband's situation. She tells me I don't understand the value of experiences and that I should be supportive. Supportive? I offered them support. I offered to help them find a rental or cover part of their expenses for a couple of months. But that's not enough. They want the whole package, free rent, my house, and my space for almost a year. And the worst part is, they're not even planning to settle down. They're still talking about taking occasional trips if they find cheap deals. So basically, they want to live in my house rent-free while still being free-spirited travelers whenever they feel like it. How does that make any sense? So now I'm sitting here, trying to figure out how to deal with the fallout. My sister's not talking to me, my parents are mad at me, and even some of our mutual friends are saying I'm being too harsh. But I don't think I'm in the wrong here. It's not like I'm kicking them when they're down. I offered to help in other ways. I just don't want them living in my house rent-free for 10 months. Am I really the asshole here? Am I being too selfish? I mean, I worked hard for this house. It's my space. But now I'm being made to feel like I'm some sort of monster for not wanting to completely upend my life for almost a year. I keep thinking about how this would play out if I said yes. My quiet evenings would be gone. My weekends would be chaos. And let's be real, once they're in, how easy would it be to get them out? What if they decide they want to stay longer? What if they never leave? And it's not just about the inconvenience. It's about the principle of it all. They made a choice, a reckless, irresponsible choice, and now they want me to bear the consequences. How is that fair? Why should I have to sacrifice my peace of mind, my routine, my entire lifestyle because they couldn't be bothered to plan properly? I'm torn between feeling guilty and feeling angry. Guilty because, well, they are family. And angry because I feel like I'm being manipulated and guilt-tripped into something I really don't want to do. Part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid. Maybe I should be more flexible, more understanding. After all, isn't that what family is for? To help each other out in times of need? But then I think about all the times in the past when I've been the responsible one, the one who always had to clean up the messes and pick up the pieces. How many times have I bailed my sister out of financial troubles? How many times have I been the voice of reason when she came up with another harebrained scheme? And it's not like they're destitute. They still have skills, they still have the ability to work. They could get jobs, rent a small apartment, start rebuilding their lives. But instead, they want to take the easy way out and crash at my place for free. I can't help but think about the message this sends to their kids, too. What are they learning from all this? That it's okay to make reckless decisions because someone will always be there to bail you out? That responsibilities and consequences don't matter as long as you're living your best life? But then I look at the photos of my niece and nephew, and my heart aches a little. They didn't ask for any of this. They're just along for the ride, victims of their parents' poor planning. Should I be punishing them for their parents' mistakes? I've always prided myself on being the stable one, the one with his life together. But now I'm questioning everything. Am I really as put together as I thought if I can't even handle this situation? Am I letting my own comfort and routine take precedence over my family's well-being? So, Reddit, what do you think? Am I the asshole for wanting to keep my house to myself? Or am I justified in standing my ground? How would you handle this situation? I'm at my wit's end here, and I could really use some outside perspective. Update 1, it's been a week since my last post, and things have only gotten more complicated. The pressure from my parents has been relentless. They've been calling every day, sometimes multiple times. My mom has been laying it on thick. How can you leave your sister and her family out in the cold, she'll say, forgetting that I offered to help them find a place and even cover some expenses. Yesterday, she called me in tears about my niece and nephew. It's a low blow, using the kids to guilt trip me, and it's working to some extent. But I remind myself that this situation is entirely of their parents' making. My dad's approach is different. "Son, I'm disappointed in you," he said during our last call. "Family is supposed to stick together in times of need. Your sister would do the same for you if the roles were reversed." I wanted to argue that point, would she really? But I bit my tongue. The constant barrage of guilt from my parents is wearing me down. I find myself second-guessing my decision. Maybe I am being too harsh. But then I think about my peace, my space, my life that I've worked so hard to build, and I steel myself again. As if the family pressure wasn't enough, I've started hearing from friends too. Word has gotten around about my sister's situation and my refusal to take them in. The reactions have been mixed. My best friend is on my side. "Dude, you're not running a charity here," he said. "You worked hard for that house. Why should you have to turn your life upside down because they made a dumb decision?" It was reassuring to hear someone validate my feelings. But not everyone has been so understanding. Another friend was shocked. "I can't believe you're not helping them out," she said. "It's just for a little while, right? You could tough it out for a few months. It's family, after all." I tried to explain my side, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. The most frustrating conversation was with my neighbor. "You know, there's plenty of room in that house of yours," he said, as if he had any right to an opinion on the matter. "It wouldn't kill you to share for a bit." I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from snapping at him. All these conflicting opinions are swirling around in my head, and I'm finding it harder to stay firm in my decision. I still believe I'm right, but the constant guilt and judgment from others is getting to me. I catch myself lying awake at night, imagining worst-case scenarios. What if my sister and her family end up on the streets? What if something happens to the kids? But then I remind myself that I did offer help, just not in the form of letting them live with me rent-free for nearly a year. The stress is affecting my daily life. I'm distracted at work and my usual evening routine has become a time of dread as I wait for the next guilt-tripping phone call or text. I've even started avoiding some of my regular hangouts, worried about running into people who might bring up the situation. Despite all this, I'm still holding firm on my decision. But it's taking a toll on me. The constant second-guessing, the guilt, the judgment from others, it's all wearing me down. I find myself wondering if there's a compromise I'm not seeing. Some way to help my sister and her family without completely sacrificing my own peace and space. But every time I try to think of a solution, I come up blank. The reality is, they need a place to live for an extended period, and I'm not willing to provide that. My sister still isn't speaking to me directly, but I hear through my parents that they're still stuck abroad, trying to scrape together enough money to come back to the States. Part of me wants to reach out to her, to try and mend fences. But another part of me is still angry at the position she's put me in. This situation has already changed my relationships with my family and friends. There's a tension now that wasn't there before, a sense of being judged and found wanting. Even if this all gets resolved tomorrow, I'm not sure things will ever go back to the way they were. So, Reddit, I'm back for more advice. How do I handle all this pressure and guilt? How do I stay firm in my decision when it feels like the whole world is against me? And most importantly, how do I move forward from here, regardless of what happens with my sister and her family? I'm trying to stay strong, but this is one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with. Any advice or words of support would be greatly appreciated. Update 2. 5 days after my last update, things took an unexpected turn. I was having a quiet Sunday when my doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found my sister, her husband, and their kids standing there with suitcases. No warning, they just showed up. They looked exhausted. My sister said they needed to talk, so I reluctantly let them in. She explained they'd returned to the States but had nowhere to go. They'd been in a cheap motel but were running out of money. I asked why they hadn't called first. My brother-in-law said they knew I'd say no, so they thought showing up might change my mind. That's when things got heated. I felt manipulated and said so. My sister accused me of being heartless. We started arguing, voices rising. "You have no right to judge our choices," she yelled. "You and your boring, safe little life. You've never taken a risk." At least my boring, safe life didn't leave me homeless with 2 kids. I retorted. The argument escalated. We were all yelling, except for the kids. My niece was crying silently, and my nephew was staring at the floor. Seeing them like that made me pause. I explained again that I couldn't have them living with me. I offered to help find a place and cover the first couple months of rent, but they insisted it wasn't enough. They needed more time to get back on their feet. We went back and forth, accusations flying. The argument got so loud that a neighbor knocked, saying they could hear shouting from down the street. I was mortified. After that, the fight seemed to go out of all of us. "You need to leave," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, but you can't stay here." My sister looked at me, tears in her eyes. "I never thought you'd turn your back on us like this," she said. "You're supposed to be family." Those words stung, but I held firm. They left reluctantly. As they were walking out, my nephew gave me a look of disappointment that nearly broke me. The aftermath was a whirlwind. My parents called, furious. They couldn't believe I'd turn away family. I tried to explain my side, but they weren't listening. Then came a flood of texts from friends and family. Some were sympathetic, others judgmental. I eventually turned off my phone. As the day wore on, guilt and worry ate at me. Where were they staying? Were the kids okay? But I reminded myself, this wasn't my responsibility. They made their choices. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing my sister's tearful face, my nephew's disappointed look. The next morning, my neighbor asked if everything was okay, mentioning the commotion yesterday. I assured her it was just a family disagreement, but I could feel her eyes on me as I left for work. At lunchtime, I called my mom to check on my sister's family. She coldly informed me they were staying with my aunt. It was cramped, but they had a roof over their heads. Driving home, I passed my aunt's house and saw my nephew taking out the trash. Our eyes met briefly, and the look of hurt on his face was like a punch to the gut. At home, I found a casserole on my porch from the neighbors, offering comfort food and a listening ear. This small gesture nearly brought me to tears. Looking around my quiet house, I questioned my decision for the first time. Had I done the right thing? Or had I let my own comfort blind me to my family's genuine need? I realized this wasn't just about my sister anymore. It was about who I am as a person, my values, and what family means to me. My relationships with everyone had changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. As I ate alone, I grappled with more questions than answers. Where do I go from here? How do I move forward? Can I find a way to help my family without completely upending my own life? I don't know what the future holds, but something has to change. I can't keep going on like this, torn between guilt and resentment. I need to find a way forward, for my sake and for my family's. So, I'm asking for advice again. How do I start to mend these broken relationships? How do I find a balance between helping my family and maintaining my own boundaries? And most importantly, how do I live with myself and the choices I've made? Update 3: A week after the confrontation with my sister's family, our private matter has become a public spectacle on social media. My sister posted an emotional message about being abandoned by family in their time of need. While not naming me, it was obvious who she meant. She painted her family as victims, omitting their year-long vacation that led to this situation. The comments exploded. People I barely knew called me heartless for turning away family. Distant relatives joined in, one aunt commenting, "I always knew that one was selfish." It was surreal seeing my character attacked by people who didn't know the full story. After hours of this, I decided to respond. I explained how I'd offered to help find a rental and cover some expenses, but couldn't accommodate for people for a year. I detailed their irresponsible decisions and my reasons for setting boundaries. The reaction was intense. Some supported me, saying I had the right to set boundaries. Others doubled down on criticism, calling me cold-hearted. The comments section became a battleground about family obligations and personal responsibility. My sister saw my post and started messaging me with accusations and insults, forgetting she started this public drama. My phone blew up with messages from family and old friends. A close cousin supported me, saying, "You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm." But an uncle left a voicemail about how I've lost my way and disappointed my late grandparents. Old acquaintances reached out with both support and judgment. It felt like everyone was suddenly evaluating my character based on this one situation. My relationship with immediate family has deteriorated further. My parents are furious, feeling I've embarrassed the family. My mom called crying, while my dad's silence is somehow worse than angry words. My sister has blocked me on all platforms. I've heard they're still with my aunt but looking for a permanent solution. I'm relieved they're figuring things out, but also feel guilty for not helping directly. The stress is affecting my health and daily life. I'm not sleeping well, have no appetite, and am constantly on edge. I've started avoiding social media, but the drama follows me. An old neighbor at the grocery store asked how I was holding up with everything going on. This has forced me to examine my values. Am I really as selfish as some claim? Or am I justified in setting boundaries and expecting adults to take responsibility? After much reflection, I've decided on a compromise. I'll offer to let them stay for 3 months rent-free, but they must actively job hunt and save for their own place. I'll help with budgeting and job connections, but they need to put in the work. I know this won't satisfy everyone, but it feels like the best balance between helping family and maintaining boundaries. I'm nervous about how this will play out. Will my sister accept? How will living together affect our relationship? How will I adjust to 4 extra people after living alone so long? Despite my apprehension, I feel relieved to have made a decision. It's not perfect, but it's a step forward. I plan to call my sister tomorrow with this offer. I hope she'll see I'm trying to meet her halfway. Maybe this can start repairing our relationship. As for the online drama, I'll make one final post explaining my decision, then step away from social media for a while. This experience has been a harsh lesson in family relationships and public opinion. I'm hopeful this decision will lead to healing and understanding. To those who've offered advice, thank you. Wish me luck, I think I'm going to need it.